The back bedroom of the old farmhouse where I grew up had no window unit, no fan running all summer, no machine of any kind humming in the corner. What it had was a wide-mouthed jar sitting on the floor near the baseboard, filled with coarse rock salt and covered with a square of old cheesecloth tied off at the neck. My mother set one out every spring. She took it in every fall, and in 50-some years of living in that hollow, we never once had a damp room, a mildewy closet smell, or a wall that sweated through a humid August. That jar cost her less than $4. It ran on nothing. It was just a simple jar sitting there. It never broke down, never needed a filter replaced, never added a single cent to the power bill. It just sat there and did its work quietly, the way the best household tools always do. Now, I want to tell you something that is going to make you a little irritated. And I say that not to get you worked up, but because I think you deserve to know it. The average plug-in dehumidifier costs somewhere between $30 and $60 just to purchase, and then it pulls anywhere from 200 to 500 watts of electricity every single hour it runs. Run one through a humid southern summer and you will feel it in your bill. The store-bought moisture packets, those little hanging sachets with the brand name on them, cost $6 to $10 for a small pack that lasts maybe 30 to 60 days before you throw it away and buy another one. Over a year, across 2 or 3 rooms, you're spending real money on a problem your grandmother already had a solution for, a $4 solution. A permanent one. It's a simple, elegant solution. Stay with me on this because the part that should make you a little angry is not just the cost. It is the fact that what I am about to show you actually works better in certain conditions than what the stores are selling. Not because it is magic, because of how moisture and salt behave together, and that is something the old mountain women understood long before anyone put it in a box with a label on it. People sometimes ask me how I know so much about keeping a house dry. The honest answer is that I grew up in a place where you had no choice but to figure it out. My name is Annie Hemingway, and I spent the first 30 years of my life on a homestead up in the Blue Ridge, in the kind of hollow where spring rains came sideways off the ridge and summer air sat so thick and wet you could almost wring it out like a wash rag. We kept a farmhouse, a root cellar, a smokehouse, and a pantry going year-round in that kind of weather. Damp was not an inconvenience for us. Damp was a genuine threat to the food we put up, to the wood in the walls, to everything a household depended on. My mother and my grandmother taught me how to fight it without spending money we did not have. This particular trick, the salt and the jar, is the one I have used the longest, in the most rooms, with the most consistent results. 60-some years of humid seasons, and it has never let me down. The reason I share what I know here is the same reason my mother shared it with me. It is about passing it on. Knowledge like this ought to keep moving. It is a gift that keeps giving. It ought to keep being passed from one person to the next, the way it always was before people started buying their solutions off a shelf. If what I share here is useful to you, go ahead and subscribe. There is more of this kind of thing coming, old methods, plain materials, real results, and I would hate for you to miss it. And tell me something in the comments while you are here. How bad is the dampness in your home right now? Is it one particular room, or does it seem to follow you everywhere? The closet, the bathroom, the basement corner? Tell me what you are dealing with. I am here to help you solve this problem. I read every comment that comes in, and it helps me know what to talk about next. Now, the reason most folks reach for an electric machine or a store-bought packet is that nobody ever explained to them how moisture actually moves through a room. And once you understand that part, the whole thing makes a different kind of sense. That is exactly where we are headed. Join me on this journey. Moisture does not just appear in a room out of nowhere. It starts with simple daily things. It comes in through the air. You can't see it, but it is there. Every time you breathe, cook, shower, or even sleep, your body and your home are releasing water vapor into the air around you. That vapor floats, it settles, it finds the coolest surface it can, a wall, a window, the back of a closet, and it sits there. Over days and weeks, that sitting moisture is what turns into that smell, that unmistakable dampness. That soft, stale, slightly sour smell that no candle covers for long. It is always there. That is not a cleaning problem. Even the cleanest home can have this issue. That is an air problem, and the solution is simpler than you think. And spraying something on the wall or burning something on the counter does nothing to fix it because you are treating the surface and leaving the cause completely alone. What an electric dehumidifier does is pull that moist air through a cold coil, condense the water out of it, and collect it in a tank you have to empty. It works, and it works quite well for what it is. Nobody is saying it does not work. Machines have their place. The trouble is that it costs money to run every hour of every day, it makes noise, and it needs to be emptied constantly. And the moment the power goes out or the unit breaks down, the moisture comes right back. You have not solved the problem. You are just managing it. The dampness is still there, waiting. You have rented a machine to manage it for as long as you keep paying. It's a continuous expense. The store sachets work on a different principle. They are convenient but temporary. They use a chemical, usually calcium chloride, that pulls water out of the air and holds it in a gel inside the pouch. That part is actually real. The chemistry is sound. You can see the water collecting. The chemistry is sound and reliable. It is science at work in your home. The trouble is that once the pouch is saturated, it is finished. It can't do any more work. You throw it away and buy another one. It is a cycle that never ends. You are paying $6 to $8 every month or two for a process that you could set up yourself, refresh as needed, and run indefinitely for almost nothing. The only reason you are buying the pouch instead of doing it yourself is that nobody ever told you the pouches are not the only way. Rock salt is hygroscopic. That is the magic word for our trick. That is the word for it, but you do not need to remember it. Just remember that it works. All it means is that salt naturally pulls water out of the air and holds on to it. This is the same reason a salt shaker gets clumpy in humid weather, the same reason the old homesteaders salted their meat and their fish for preservation. Salt and moisture are drawn to each other. When you put enough salt in a room and give it the right setup, it will quietly absorb the excess moisture in the air around it, day after day, without any power at all. Here is what you need. It is a very short list. Pick up a bag of coarse rock salt, not table salt, not iodized salt, coarse rock salt or pickling salt from the grocery store or the canning aisle. Some hardware stores carry it too, near the water softener supplies. Just look in the plumbing or canning sections. A 2-pound bag runs about $3 to $4. It's a small investment for a big result. You will also need a wide-mouth mason jar, a quart size is ideal, and a small square of cheesecloth or any thin cotton fabric you have around the house. Old pillowcase, worn-out tea towel, it does not matter as long as it breathes. We're looking for function over form. That is your whole supply list. Nothing complicated, nothing expensive. Take your mason jar and fill it about halfway with the coarse rock salt. Make sure it's nice and level. Do not pack it down. You want it to stay airy. You want the air to be able to move through the surface of the salt, so leave it loose. This is key to making it work. Lay your cheesecloth or cloth square over the mouth of the jar and secure it with the jar's screw band, or a rubber band if that is what you have. The cloth keeps dust out and lets air pass through freely. It protects the salt while it does its job. That is the whole assembly. It's that simple. That is the device. A piece of mountain wisdom in your home. $3 or $4, materials you either already own or can pick up on your next grocery run, and maybe 5 minutes of your time. Where you place it matters more than people think. You want the jar sitting in the part of the room where air tends to settle and go still. That is usually a corner near a baseboard or on a low shelf. Not on top of a dresser, not up high on a shelf. Keep it where the air pools. Cold, moist air is heavier than warm, dry air, so it sinks. It pools at floor level, in corners, along the bottom of walls. That is where your jar needs to be, low and in a corner where the dampest air in the room naturally collects. If you have a bathroom, put it on the floor beside the vanity or near the base of the tub. If it is a closet, set it on the floor in the back corner where the smell is worst. If it is a bedroom, tuck it along the baseboard on the wall that faces outside, because that is the wall that sweats first. Within a few days, you will start to see the salt clumping and darkening. That is not the salt going bad. That is it doing its job. It is holding the moisture it pulled from the air. When the surface of the salt looks wet and the crystals have melted down into each other and the jar feels heavy, that is your sign that it is time to refresh it. Take the jar outside or to a sunny windowsill, remove the cloth, and let the salt dry out in the sun for a few hours. The moisture evaporates back out, the salt dries and lightens back to its original color, and you put the cloth back on and return it to its corner. The same salt, refreshed and ready to work again. You can do this for years with the same $4 bag. Now, I want to be straight with you about what this method will and will not do, because that matters more to me than having you walk away thinking you have found a cure for every damp problem a house can have. A jar of rock salt in a corner is not a flood fix. If your basement takes on standing water after a hard rain, if you have a foundation crack letting groundwater in, if your crawl space is genuinely wet, that is a structural problem, and no amount of salt is going to address it. What you need in those situations is a contractor looking at your drainage and your foundation, not a mason jar. I would rather tell you that plainly than have you try this in the wrong situation and decide it does not work, because the fault would not be with the method. It would be with the application. This method also works best in smaller enclosed spaces. A bedroom, a bathroom, a closet, a pantry room, a basement corner that is damp but not actively wet. In a very large open room with high ceilings, a single jar will do less than you want it to. It will still help, but you would need several placed around the perimeter to make a real difference. And even then, the effect is gentler than a machine running 8 hours a day. What the salt does well is maintain. It keeps a room that is mostly dry from tipping over into that clammy, stale feeling that sets in during humid months. Think of it less as a rescue and more as a steady, quiet correction. That is what it was always meant to be. And one last honest thing, if you live in a climate that runs 90% humidity for 6 months of the year, you may need more help than this alone can give. The salt will still do useful work, but pair it with good cross ventilation, cracked windows on dry days, and whatever other passive cooling and drying habits your house allows. No single tool solves every condition. The salt jar is one of several things in a well-kept home, not the whole answer by itself. With that understanding clear, here is how you make it a real system rather than a single jar in one room. Start with the rooms that give you the most trouble. That is usually the bathroom, any bedroom on an exterior wall, and whatever closet or storage space has that smell you cannot quite get rid of. Put a jar in each one, low and in the corner, and leave them. Check them once a week. It takes 30 seconds to lift the cloth and look at the surface of the salt. Wet and clumped means it is working hard and needs refreshing soon. Dry and loose means the room is in good shape and the jar can keep going. The pantry is one of the places this matters most, and it is the place people overlook. Dry food storage depends on low moisture just as much as it depends on cool temperatures. A damp pantry is where flour goes stale before its time, where crackers go soft, where spices lose their strength, where the corner of a paper bag starts to soften and smell. A jar of rock salt on the lowest pantry shelf near the back wall will keep the air in that space noticeably drier. You will feel the difference when you open the door, a cleaner, crisper air, the way a pantry is supposed to smell. Closets are the other place. Clothing holds moisture and releases it slowly, and a closed closet with poor air circulation is exactly the environment where that musty smell takes root and spreads into the fabric of everything hanging in there. One jar on the closet floor, refreshed when the salt gets saturated, and that problem mostly goes away on its own. Cedar blocks are another old mountain trick for closets. They add their own drying and pest-deterring work alongside the salt, but the salt alone will handle the moisture part reliably. The weekly habit that makes the whole system stick is simple. Pick one day, Sunday morning, whatever works for you, and walk through the house with it in mind. Check the jars, just a quick look once a week. Carry any that need refreshing outside to a sunny spot or a bright windowsill. While they are drying, open the windows if the outside air is drier than the inside air. You can tell by feel, step outside, take a breath, and notice whether it feels heavier or lighter than the air in the house. On a clear morning after a dry night, the outside air is usually the drier of the two, and 10 minutes of cross-ventilation while the salt dries does more for a house than most people realize. Bring the jars back in once the salt is light and dry, set them back in their corners, and you are done for the week. The whole routine takes less time than making a pot of coffee. My mother had a name for the back bedroom of our farmhouse. She called it the wet room, not because it leaked. It never did, but because it faced northeast and the morning fog off the ridge settled against that wall every spring morning from March through June. You could feel it when you walked in, not dripping, not visibly wet, just that particular heaviness in the air that told you moisture was sitting somewhere it should not be. She put her first salt jar in that room sometime in the early years of her marriage, after my grandmother showed her the method. My grandmother had learned it from her own mother, who had kept a farmhouse dry through mountain winters and wet springs without a single electric appliance to her name. The jar my mother used was a quart canning jar, the same kind she used for everything else on that homestead, and the salt she used came from the same 50-pound sack she kept in the pantry for curing and preserving. Nothing special was purchased for this method. Nothing was set aside just for this. That is the Appalachian way of it. The same materials serve 3 and 4 purposes at once because buying something for only one job is a luxury a working household cannot always afford. That northeast bedroom stayed dry and clean-smelling through every humid season I can remember growing up. My mother refreshed the salt on washing day when she was already outside with wet things drying on the line. She never made a separate chore of it. She folded it into what she was already doing, the way every sensible household task got folded into the rhythm of the day. That is the part nobody tells you about the old methods. They were not just cheaper. They were designed to fit into a life, not to interrupt it. Nobody is going to run a television advertisement telling you to buy a $4 bag of rock salt and a mason jar from your pantry shelf. There is no company behind that advice. There is no subscription, no replacement pack, no branded refill pouch, no warranty plan, no seasonal promotion. The old method has no profit margin attached to it, and that is precisely why it disappeared from common knowledge the moment there was money to be made selling you something shinier in its place. It is not that anyone sat down and decided to hide this from you. It is simpler than that, and in some ways it is more frustrating. The information just stopped being passed down, because passing it down does not sell anything. Your grandmother knew it well. Her mother knew it too. The women in every mountain hollow and every working farmhouse across this country knew it, because they had no other option and necessity taught them what works. Then the electric appliances came in, and the store-bought sachets came in, and the knowledge got quiet. It is not erased, it just got quiet. It is just quiet for now, waiting for someone to say it out loud again. What you lose when you replace every old household method with a product is not just money, though the money adds up faster than you think. What you lose is the confidence that comes from knowing how to handle your own home, from understanding what is happening in the air of a room and knowing how to correct it with what you already have. That confidence is worth something real. It is the difference between a household that runs because you know how to run it and a household that runs only as long as you can keep buying the things that manage it for you. The old women in our hollow were not dependent on a store shelf. They were dependent on their own knowledge, and that knowledge kept them steady through hard seasons in a way that no product ever could. There is no profit in the old way. That is exactly why nobody sells it to you, and that is exactly why it is worth knowing. So here is what I want you to do this week. Go to the grocery store or the hardware store and pick up a bag of coarse rock salt. Pickling salt works fine. Water softener salt works. Any coarse non-iodized salt will do the job. A 2-pound bag costs $3 to $4 and will last you a long time. Grab a wide-mouth quart mason jar, if you do not already have one, and cut a square of cheesecloth or thin cotton fabric to cover the mouth. Fill the jar halfway with the salt, loose and unpacked. Lay the cloth over the top and secure it with the screw band or a rubber band. Set the jar in the lowest corner of the dampest room in your house, on the floor, along the baseboard, in the back of that closet that always smells off, on the bottom shelf of the pantry. Leave it there in the corner. Check it once a week. When the salt looks wet and heavy, take it outside to a sunny spot and let it dry for a few hours, then bring it back in. That is the whole method. It really is that simple. $4, 5 minutes, and a weekly check that takes less time than it took me to describe it. If your house has more than one problem room, and most homes do, set up a jar in each one. The bathroom floor beside the vanity, the bedroom corner on the outside wall, the back of the coat closet, the pantry shelf near the baseboard. Each jar works on its own little territory of air quietly and continuously without drawing a wad of power. If this is the kind of household knowledge you want more of, the practical, low-cost, old-fashioned kind that actually works, then subscribe and stay close. There is a great deal more where this came from, and I put something new out regularly. Every trick I share costs next to nothing and comes from the same place this one did. Decades of keeping a home running in the mountains with what was on hand and what the women before me took the time to teach. Tell me in the comments, what is the dampest spot in your home right now? The bathroom, a bedroom, a basement corner, a closet that smells no matter what you do? Drop it down below and tell me what you are working with. I read every comment that comes in, and your answers genuinely help me decide what to talk about next. The next thing I want to show you follows naturally from this one. Keeping a room dry solves half the problem. The other half is what that moisture has already left behind, the smell that settles into walls and fabric and wood even after the air clears. There is an old Appalachian method for pulling that out too, and it costs about as much as what we talked about today. We will get into that soon. Keep watching. Trust what works. Keep your home dry and your knowledge close. A well-kept house does not ask much of you, just attention, a little know-how, and the willingness to trust what works over what is advertised. The women who taught me never needed a label to tell them something was worth using. Neither do you. Use the old ways. Take care of your home.